There is a moment in every believer's journey that almost no one talks about. A moment when the energy you once had simply disappears. In the beginning, everything felt powerful. You prayed with focus. You listened to reminders and felt your chest soften. You opened the Qur'an and your heart responded immediately. Every act of worship felt alive. But slowly, something changes. You still pray, you still try, but the emotional spark is gone. And this is where many people become afraid. You start wondering if something is wrong with your faith. You begin questioning yourself. Why does it not feel the same anymore? But what if the disappearance of motivation is not a sign of decline? What if it is the beginning of a deeper test? Because motivation can carry anyone. Emotion can move anyone. But Allah is not only looking for the believer who worships Him when it feels beautiful, He is looking for the believer who continues when the beauty fades. When the excitement disappears, sincerity begins to reveal itself. And the question becomes very simple. Will you still show up when your heart is quiet? Will you still stand for prayer when your mind feels tired? Will you still open the Qur'an when your heart does not react the way it once did? Because real devotion is not proven during emotional moments. It is proven during quiet ones. Anyone can worship when inspiration is high. Anyone can feel close to Allah when their heart is soft. But the believer who continues when the feelings disappear is showing something deeper. They're showing loyalty. They are showing sincerity. They are showing that their relationship with Allah is not built on emotional moments, but on commitment. And sometimes Allah allows the feeling to fade for a reason, so that your worship stops being about how it feels and becomes about who it is for. Because when you continue showing up for Allah, even when motivation disappears, that is when your sincerity truly begins to grow. When worship feels heavy, your reward with Allah multiplies. There are nights when worship feels light. You stand in prayer and your heart feels present. Your focus feels clear. Your mind is calm. The verses you recite feel meaningful. Those moments are beautiful and they are a gift from Allah. But they are not the moments that define the strength of your devotion. The real test arrives on the nights when everything feels heavy. When your body feels tired, when your mind keeps drifting, when standing for prayer feels harder than usual, you may sit there for a few minutes before starting, telling yourself you will pray in a moment. And inside your mind, a quiet voice appears. You are too tired tonight. You can do it tomorrow. Just rest today. This is the moment many people step back. Not because they stop believing in Allah, but because the act suddenly feels difficult. But understand something powerful about how Allah looks at worship. Allah does not only look at the act, He looks at the effort behind the act. When prayer feels easy, it is beautiful. But when prayer feels heavy and you still stand, it becomes even more valuable. Because now your worship carries struggle, and struggle carries sincerity. Every step you take toward prayer while tired is seen by Allah. Every verse you read while your focus is imperfect is still counted. Every moment you resist the urge to stop is recorded. The Prophet ﷺ taught that when a believer struggles with an act of worship but continues anyway, the reward increases because Allah sees the effort it takes for you to remain devoted. So the night worship feels heavy is not a sign that your faith is weak. It may actually be the moment your reward becomes greater than before. Because sometimes the most valuable acts of worship are the ones you almost did not do but chose to do anyway. Allah sometimes removes the spiritual feeling so your worship becomes sincere. There is something very powerful about emotional moments in worship. When your heart feels soft, when tears come during dua, when the words of the Qur'an touch something deep inside you, those moments feel unforgettable. They make you feel close to Allah. They make you feel spiritually alive. But there is something many believers do not realize. Emotional moments are beautiful, but they are not the foundation of faith. Because emotions rise and fall. Some days your heart feels soft. Other days it feels quiet. Some nights you feel deeply connected. Other nights your mind feels distracted. This is part of being human. But sometimes we begin depending on the emotional experience itself. We start hoping every prayer will feel powerful. We expect every reminder to move our heart, and when that feeling disappears, we become worried. We assume something is wrong. But sometimes Allah removes the emotional feeling for a reason. not to distance you from Him, but to purify your intention. Because when the feeling disappears, something important becomes clear. Now the question is not how the worship feels. The question becomes why you are doing it. Will you still pray when your heart feels quiet? Will you still make dua when tears do not come? Will you still open the Qur'an when your emotions are calm? When you continue worship in those moments, something powerful happens. Your worship stops being connected to feelings and it becomes connected to sincerity. You are no longer worshiping Allah because of the experience. You are worshiping Him because He deserves your worship. And that shift is one of the most important steps in a believer's spiritual growth. Because sincere worship does not depend on emotion. It depends on intention. And sometimes Allah removes the feeling so the intention can finally become pure. The most beloved deeds to Allah are the ones you continue even when your heart feels empty. One of the most profound teachings of the Prophet ﷺ is simple but very powerful. He said that the most beloved deeds to Allah are the ones that are consistent even if they are small. Think about what this means. Allah is not only looking at how big an action is, He is looking at how steady it is. Because consistency reveals sincerity. Anyone can perform a strong act of worship for a short time. Anyone can pray long prayers during a moment of emotional inspiration. Anyone can make powerful dua when their heart is overwhelmed. But the real test is not the intense moment. The real test is what happens after that moment passes. Will you still pray when the emotional excitement is gone? Will you still read Qur'an when your mind feels distracted? Will you still make dua when your heart feels quiet? This is where many people struggle, because when the emotional energy disappears, the act of worship begins to feel ordinary. And ordinary acts are easy to neglect, but Allah loves the servant who continues. The one who keeps showing up, even when their prayer is short, even when their focus is imperfect, even when their heart feels calm instead of emotional. Because Allah does not expect perfection from you. He expects sincerity and persistence. And every small act you repeat builds something powerful between you and Allah. A relationship that is not based on emotional moments, but on loyalty. The believer who continues to worship Allah consistently is slowly building a life of devotion. Day after day, prayer after prayer, page after page of Qur'an. And these small, repeated acts slowly transform a person's heart. Because consistency trains the soul. It teaches your heart that Allah is not someone you remember only during emotional moments. He is someone you remain connected to every single day. When you obey Allah without motivation, that is the proof of true love. People often misunderstand love. They think love is only a feeling, something emotional, something powerful that comes and goes. But real love is not only a feeling. Real love is commitment. Because feelings can disappear, but commitment continues. And your relationship with Allah follows the same truth. There will be moments when worship feels beautiful. Moments when your heart feels soft in prayer. Moments when remembering Allah fills you with peace. Those moments are a gift, but they are not the true test of love. The real test of love appears when the feeling disappears. When you wake up for Fajr and your body is exhausted. When your bed feels warm and the room feels quiet. In that moment, there is no excitement. There is no strong emotion pushing you forward. There is only a decision. Will you stand before Allah or will you return to sleep? Think about the believer who lowers their gaze in a moment of temptation. Not because it feels easy, but because they know Allah sees them. Think about the believer who continues making dua even when answers feel delayed. They do not stop turning to Allah. They continue asking. They continue hoping. These moments may feel small, but they carry enormous meaning, because every time you obey Allah without motivation, you are proving something powerful. You are showing that your worship is not based on how you feel. It is based on who Allah is. You are showing loyalty. You are showing sincerity. You are showing that your devotion does not disappear when the emotions fade. And that kind of love is incredibly valuable in the sight of Allah, because the believer who continues obeying Allah when motivation is gone is not acting out of emotion. They are acting out of devotion. And devotion is the deepest form of love a servant can show their Lord. The moment you feel like quitting may be the moment Allah is watching your patience. There is always a moment in every struggle when the thought of stopping appears. It does not arrive loudly, it arrives quietly. You are in the middle of an act of worship. You are trying to stay consistent, but suddenly your heart feels tired. Your body feels heavy. Your mind starts offering simple suggestions. Just stop for today. You can continue tomorrow. You have already done enough. These thoughts feel reasonable. They feel harmless. But this moment is more important than it appears. Because in that exact moment, a quiet battle begins inside your heart. One part of you wants comfort. One part of you wants devotion. One part of you wants rest. One part of you wants to continue walking toward Allah. And Allah sees that struggle. He sees the moment you almost stopped. He sees the hesitation in your chest. He sees the effort it takes for you to keep going. And that internal struggle is precious in the sight of Allah. Because faith is not only proven when things are easy, faith is proven when stopping would be easier, but you continue anyway. Think about the believer who almost skipped their prayer, but stood up at the last moment. Think about the believer who almost closed the Qur'an, but decided to read one more page. Think about the believer who almost gave up making dua, but raised their hands again. Those moments may feel small to you, but they are enormous in the sight of Allah, because the angels are not only writing what you did, they are writing the struggle behind what you did. And sometimes the greatest reward is written at the exact moment when quitting felt easier, but you chose patience instead. When your motivation dies, your sincerity finally comes alive. If your motivation feels weaker than it once did, do not immediately assume something is wrong. Many believers go through this phase, a phase where the emotional excitement they once felt begins to fade. At first, this feels frightening, because you remember how alive your worship once felt. You remember the nights when prayer felt powerful. You remember the reminders that made your heart tremble. And now things feel quieter, more ordinary, less emotional. But sometimes this quiet stage is actually a sign of growth, because motivation is emotional. And emotions are temporary. They rise, they fall, they come and go without warning. But sincerity is different. Sincerity does not depend on emotion. Sincerity continues whether the heart feels excited or not. And the believers who reach the highest levels with Allah are not the ones who always feel motivated. They are the ones who remain devoted when motivation disappears. They pray when their hearts feel alive. And they pray when their hearts feel silent. They remember Allah when tears come easily. And they remember Him when their emotions feel calm. They continue walking toward Allah through every stage of their faith, through inspiration, through dryness, through struggle, through quiet persistence. And that quiet persistence is incredibly valuable, because the believer who continues worship when motivation has faded is showing something powerful. They are showing that their relationship with Allah is not built on emotional moments. It is built on loyalty. So if you are still praying, even when it feels heavy, if you are still turning back to Allah, even when your heart feels tired, if you are still trying to stay consistent, even after struggling, then understand something deeply. Your motivation may be fading, but your sincerity may finally be coming alive. And in the sight of Allah, sincerity is far more valuable than motivation could ever be. The days you keep going without motivation may be the days Allah loves the most. There will be days in your life when worship feels beautiful, days when your heart feels soft, days when your prayers feel deep and your connection with Allah feels clear. Those days are a gift. But they are not the only days that matter. There will also be days when everything feels quiet, days when your motivation disappears, days when your heart feels tired and your mind feels distracted. You pray, but it feels ordinary. You open the Qur'an, but your emotions do not move the way they once did. You make dua, but the words feel simple. And during those days, a dangerous thought may appear. You may begin to think your worship is no longer valuable. You may feel like you are doing less than before. But what you may not realize is that these quiet days can be some of the most valuable days in your entire journey with Allah. Because these are the days when your worship becomes purely for Him. There is no emotional reward pushing you forward. There is no powerful feeling carrying you. There is only your decision to continue, and that decision is extremely precious because Allah sees what no one else sees. He sees the believer who prays even when their heart feels tired. He sees the believer who opens the Qur'an even when their mind is distracted. He sees the believer who continues making dua even when their emotions feel quiet. Every one of those moments is seen. Every one of those moments is recorded. And sometimes the acts that feel smallest to you are the ones most loved by Allah, because they prove something powerful. They prove that you are not worshiping Allah for a feeling. You are worshiping Him because He is your Lord. So if there are days when your motivation disappears, do not stop walking toward Allah. Do not step away from worship. Do not assume your efforts are weak, because the days you continue without motivation may be the days Allah loves the most. And those quiet, unseen days may be building a reward far greater than you realize.